Happy Wednesday, everyone. Did you know it's International Strategic Planning Month? If not, that's okay, because today's guest might be one of the best to help us with that. Today's edition of Green Builder Media's Impact Series, Game Changers in Sustainability, welcomes Jeremy Rifkin from the Foundation on Economic Trends. Now, before we start digging into any numbers, I wanted to tell you that today's webinar would not be possible without the support of our generous sponsors. And those sponsors are Owens Corning. Build higher performance homes with Owens Corning. And the Green Builder Coalition. Green Builder Coalition offers in-depth research and technical information, as well as national and state advocacy resources. The Coalition is also the home of the Green Building Administrator, the industry's only software program that allows you to compare the three major national green building programs. For more information on our membership levels, please visit www.greenbuildercoalition.org and click on Member Benefits. I'm Mike Collignan, Executive Director of the Green Builder Coalition, and I'm sitting in for Ron Jones today, so I'll be your host and moderator for today's webinar. During the course of today's presentation, you can submit questions for our guest at any time. To do so, simply use the small box at the bottom of the Q&A. I'll review those questions and pose them to Jeremy at the end of his presentation. Now please bear with me as I try to summarize our guest's career accomplishments. Jeremy Rifkin is the best-selling author of 20 books on the impact of scientific and technological changes on the economy, the workforce, society, and the environment. His books have been translated into more than 35 languages and are used in hundreds of universities, corporations, and government agencies around the world. Mr. Rifkin holds a degree in economics from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and a degree in international affairs from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Mr. Rifkin is the principal architect of the European Union's Third Industrial Revolution long-term economic sustainability plan to address the triple challenge of the global economic crisis, energy security, and climate change. His vision of a sustainable post-carbon economic era has been endorsed by the European Union and the United Nations. He has been an advisor to the leaders of Germany, France, Portugal, Spain, and Slovenia during their respective European Council presidencies on issues related to the economy, climate change, and energy security. Jeremy is the president of the TIR Consulting Group. His global economic development team is working with cities, regions, and national governments to develop the Internet of Things infrastructure for a collaborative commons and a third industrial revolution. Mr. Rifkin is a senior lecturer at the Wharton School's Executive Education Program at the University of Pennsylvania, where he instructs CEOs and senior management on transitioning their business operations into sustainable third industrial revolution economies. His monthly column on global issues has appeared in many leading newspapers and magazines, all in the US, the UK, Germany, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Greece, Denmark, the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, Luxembourg, Argentina, and the UAE. Mr. Rifkin is the founder and president of the Foundation on Economic Trends in Bethesda, Maryland. The foundation examines the economic, environmental, social, and cultural impacts of new technologies introduced into the global economy. And his latest book is the Zero Marginal Cost Society, the Internet of Things, the Collaborative Commons, and the Eclipse of Capitalism. Jeremy, welcome to the Impact Series.
It's nice to be here, and hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. Let me start off by saying that I'm going to do about a 30 or 40-minute presentation, which will condense some of the much more detailed central themes in my new book, and it's called the Zero Marginal Cost Society, and the subtitle is The Internet of Things, the Collaborative Commons, and the Eclipse of Capitalism. Zero Marginal Cost Society. Let me start off by saying that we're beginning to glimpse the bare outlines of a new economic system entering onto the world stage. It's called the sharing economy on the collaborative commons. And this new economic system is flourishing alongside the exchange economy in the capitalist market. This is the first new economic system to emerge since the advent of capitalism and socialism in the early 19th century. So it's a remarkable, although still young, historical event. Oftentimes, the sharing economy and the collaborative commons is cooperating with the capitalist marketplace. Sometimes it competes. By 2050, 36 years from now, market capitalism will still be here. It will be robust, but totally transformed. And to the extent that it's able to benefit the growth and development of the sharing economy in the commons, it will be a vibrant player. But I don't think market capitalism will any longer be the exclusive agent and arbiter of economic change. It's going to have to share the center stage with this new economic system that's emerging, this collaborative commons. The trigger for this great economic transformation is something called zero marginal cost. Now, marginal costs are the cost, of course, of producing an additional unit of a good or service after we've paid our fixed costs. Now, I teach at the Wharton School, and I've taught the Advanced Management Program and other programs for many, many years, our CEO programs. And we teach our business leaders that they always have to be in search of new technologies that can increase their productivity, reduce their marginal cost, so they can put out cheaper goods and services, win over consumers and market share, and bring some nice profits back to their investors. It's simply, in the whole history of capitalism, none of us ever expected, in our wildest imagination, a technology revolution so extreme in its productivity that it might actually reduce marginal costs for some goods and services to near zero, making them essentially free, abundant, and beyond the profit motive in a market exchange economy. Let me back up for a moment with a context here. My read on economic history is that the great economic paradigm shifts occur when three technology revolutions come together to create a single, seamless, general-purpose technology platform. Let me preface that. There haven't been that many great economic paradigm shifts in history. We were forage-hunter societies for most of our history. About 10,000 years ago, we introduced early agricultural and pastoral societies. 3000 BC, we introduced the great hydraulic civilization based on centralized canal-based irrigation agriculture. We had predatory empires like the Roman Empire, early market economies in the 1600s, and industrial capitalism. And in all of these paradigm shifts, three technology revolutions have emerged at a point in time and converged into a single platform. New communication technologies to more efficiently manage economic activity, new energy resources to more efficiently power economic activity, new forms of transportation logistics to more efficiently move economic activity. When communication, energy, and transport come together, they change the economic equation and our entire way of organizing economic life. I'll give you two quick examples. The first and second industrial revolutions of the 19th and 20th century. The first industrial revolution saw the coming together of steam-powered printing and the telegraph with cheap coal powered by steam engines and locomotives on national rail systems, communication, energy, transport. And that gave rise to the stockholding corporation, building telegraph systems and railroads across national territories required massive capital. Stockholding corporations were formed, and then a new business model was created called the vertically integrated business enterprise. These giant enterprises put everything under one roof from supply to distribution because that was the most efficient ways to create what we call economies of scale. So they could put out products with a lower marginal cost and with their volume be able to win over enough market share to bring back profit to their investors. We kept that business model in the 20th century, vertically integrated enterprises, stockholding companies, and we introduced a new communication, energy, transport mix, a second industrial revolution, centralized electricity, and actually particularly the telephone, later radio and television, converged with cheap oil, powered by internal combustion engines, and a transport system based on cars, buses, and trucks on national road systems and highways. The second industrial revolution took us through the 20th century, and it peaked in July 2008 when Brent crude oil hit 147 a barrel. And if you recall that month, purchasing power shut down around the world because everything's dependent on fossil fuels and the technologies that we created in that communication, energy, and transport mix. Our fertilizers, pesticides, construction materials, most of our pharmaceutical products, synthetic fiber, power, transport, heat, and light. So when the cost of Brent crude oil went over about 120 a barrel, every other price went up. And you'll recall by July 2008, prices were so prohibitively expensive for so many things that we needed that purchasing power slowed to a halt around the world, and we had the great economic collapse, the great earthquake. That was the beginning of the Great Recession. And the collapse of the financial market 60 days later was actually an aftershock. We're now in kind of a 30-year period of a deep sunset for the second industrial revolution. Fossil fuels and nuclear power have matured. The energies are more expensive. The pollution bill's high, especially with climate change with fossil fuels. The technologies have lost their S-curve. Internal combustion engines, centralized electricity have very little productivity left in them. And now we have real-time climate change at the front door, which is the real wild card in the room. We are, however, right now on the cusp of a third industrial revolution, a new convergence of communication, energy, and transport. And let me share an anecdote for a moment. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first few weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy on her watch. And when I got there, the first thing I asked the new chancellor is, how do you grow the German economy in the last stages of a great energy era whose technologies are moribund and infrastructure is now in disrepair? After that first meeting, the chancellor said, Jeremy, I want the plan you're outlining for Germany. And now it's being implemented in Germany. I'll lay out that plan for you. The communication internet that's now maturing is morphing to a super internet of things. So the communication internet is beginning to converge with a nascent, digitalized renewable energy internet and a very fledgling automated transport and logistics internet to create three internets in one system: communication, energy, transport, and logistics. And companies like IBM, Cisco, GE, and Siemens, and two of those four companies are in my global team. They're laying out sensors all over the world, connecting every device with every machine, with every human being. So we have about 13 billion sensors now, and those sensors are taking real-time data and flowing it back to the three emerging internets. So we have sensors in the agricultural fields, factory floors, warehouses, smart roads, retail shops, and smart homes, continually monitoring and sending data back to this incipient Internet of Things platform. By 2030, we'll probably have upwards of 100 trillion sensors. No one's quite sure. And of course, it raises some very significant issues, very troublesome issues, which I go into very heavy detail in the Zero Marginal Cost Society in the book. How do we address the question of network neutrality? How do we make sure that the Internet of Things remains open, transparent? How do we protect personal privacy, data security, and thwart cyber terrorism? These are very big, big-ticket issues. But assume for a moment we can address all of those issues convincingly. What the Internet of Things platform allows us to do is it means that 40% of the human race that's now connected, and 100% of the human race in 20 years, the Chinese now have a smartphone for $25. So if you're making $2 a day, you're going to be connected. It means the human race, each individual or nonprofits or private making enterprises, can go up on the Internet of Things platform and take a sheath out of that Internet of Things data. And that sheath would cover their value chain that they're interested in. And then they could use their own computers, smartphones, and mine the analytics in their sheath of the value chain. And with those analytics, create apps and algorithms that would allow them to dramatically increase their aggregate energy efficiency, dramatically increase their productivity, and reduce the marginal cost of producing energy, 3D printed products, and other goods and services to near zero, allowing them to share much of this, the energy and manufactured products, on a sharing economy on the collaborative commons. Now, some folks say, is this science fiction? No, we're already doing this. The first Internet is in, and it's wreaked havoc across traditional industries. The communication Internet. In the last 14 years, hundreds of millions of young people, this started with Napster, file sharing, music, hundreds of millions of young people are now prosumers. Instead of sellers and buyers and owners and workers, the new prosumers are producers, users, and sharers. And there, hundreds of millions of young people are beginning to produce and share their own music, a zero marginal cost on the sharing economy and the global commons. They're producing and sharing their own YouTube videos, no copyrights, again, at zero marginal cost on the collaborative commons. producing and sharing their own news blogs and social media, again, zero marginal cost on the collaborative commons, and producing and sharing their own ebooks and even their own knowledge on Wikipedia. Again, zero marginal cost on the commons. And most recently, massive open online college courses. We have now 6 million students in the last 24 months who in every country but North Korea, which is the one country that actually needs these courses, but they're taking free courses taught by the best professors, best universities at near zero marginal cost for free and getting college credit. So we've seen some of the biggest vertically integrated enterprises of the 20th century go down in 14 years. The recording industry is a shadow of itself. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business. The television industry is suffering as more young people are spending time on YouTube. And now book publishing income has dropped, and universities are rethinking their business model. However, up until this point in time, the assumption was that the zero marginal cost phenomenon, it's never zero, near zero marginal cost phenomena, while it's devastated some of the biggest enterprises of the 20th century and allowed us to democratize communication, entertainment, news, and knowledge in less than 15 years across much of the planet, which is just amazing, there's an assumption that there's a firewall here, and that the near zero marginal cost phenomenon will not cross the firewall from the virtual world of bits into the physical world of atoms. That firewall has now been breached. And in the Zero Marginal Cost Society, in the book, I point out that the breach is the Internet of Things. Because now that the communication Internet is converging with a distributed renewable energy Internet and a digitalized transport and logistics Internet, we can begin to move our energy to near zero marginal cost and our transport and logistics to near zero marginal cost, allowing us to begin to make, store, and move physical things at near zero marginal cost, just as we've done with virtual goods. Germany is a good case in point, renewable energy. The Chancellor's been in for 7 years now. They have a good working coalition with the Social Democrats, and the Greens are also working alongside. We're 27% green electricity now in Germany. We're heading to 35% green electricity by 2020. In May of this year, we had one Sunday where 75% of all the electricity powering the third most robust economy in the world was renewable energy. We had negative prices all day, near zero marginal cost. Now, as many of you know, the fixed cost of these technologies, solar and wind, are on an exponential curve, not too dissimilar from the exponential curve in computing. When I was a young kid, I'm sure I'm by far the oldest guy here on this call. When I was a young kid, computers cost millions of dollars. Now they cost $25 for a smartphone, because we've doubled the capacity and half the cost with our computer chips every couple of years. And some of you know, we have a similar exponential curve with solar and wind for 20 years. A solar watt cost about $68 to generate in 1970s, and now a solar watt's about 66 cents. So the fixed costs are plummeting in Germany for solar and wind technologies. But once you pay the fixed cost, the marginal cost of the energy being generated is near zero. The sun does not send a bill. All you have to do is keep that solar panel clean after you paid for it. The wind does not send a bill. It flows across your land. All you have to do is keep the wind turbine clean. The geothermal heat coming up from the ground doesn't send a bill. It's free. You just have to keep the geothermal heat pump clean. Same with bioconverters, etc. So in Germany, they're going across a hump now. If some of you read my last book, The Third Industrial Revolution, I said they have to put in 5 pillars for that energy Internet. They did good on Pillar 1. They got a feed-in tariff. They got millions of people producing green electricity. Pillar 2, they converted 1 million buildings, homes, offices, and factories to micro power plants. They retrofitted them, got them energy efficient, put the technologies on. But Pillar 3, they didn't put in the storage in time. So we're losing 3 out of 4 kilowatts, having a tough time with peak and base loads. Pillar 4, they didn't put in the energy Internet and digitalize it quick enough. So it's very difficult to handle millions of small players. And Pillar 5, transport and logistics, they're doing okay. So I give them a B-, but that's better than most countries. Right now, in the next 6 months, I'm in touch with the Vice Chancellor, Sigmar Gabriel, who's in charge of the economy, and we are handling the other pillars. They will be in line by September. But what's interesting is who's producing the green electricity in Germany. The big 4 power companies, Vettel, EMBW, RWE, and E.ON, these giant vertically integrated enterprises of the 20th century, have gone down as power generators. And what happened to the recording industry and television, newspapers and magazines, book publishing, the knowledge industry, happened to them in less than 7 years. The vast majority of electricity is being produced by small players, small and medium-sized enterprises, some large companies, farmers, consumers, homeowners, neighborhood associations. They're creating electricity cooperatives, which are shared commons. They're getting low-interest loans from banks. All the loans they need are there because they know they'll pay as they save from the energy savings. And they're producing the power, millions of small players. Think file sharing of music. Think blogs. The big four power companies are producing less than 7% of electricity, and they're getting out of the game of generating the new power. They're not going to get out of the game because they're going to end up trying to aggregate the energy internet. And they'll likely, the new business model we've recommended to them is you run the energy internet, cooperatives will produce the power and send it to you, and you'll make money by selling as little electricity as you can. And that is, you'll set up, as an electricity company, you'll set up a commons like Facebook, Twitter, and other set up commons. And you will help thousands of small, medium, and large enterprises by helping, by mining their sheep in the economic value chain on the Internet of Things. You will use the analytics in their particular part of the value chain to create algorithms for your clients so you can dramatically increase their productivity, reduce their marginal cost, and then thousands of businesses, nonprofit and profit, will share their productivity gains back with the transmission company. So you actually make more money by selling less electricity and by creating a more extreme productivity and more sustainable efficiencies. So we're seeing, just as we've seen the democratization of communication and entertainment and news and knowledge, with hundreds of millions and even billions of people at one time or another have contributed something as prosumers to the communication internet, we're now seeing the beginning of democratization of energy. It's now, this is the formal plan of the EU, which I was privileged to develop with them over the last 14 years, but now it's moved to China. And about 2 years ago, my last book came out in China, and by sheer good fortune, Wang Yang, who at that time was the president of Guangdong, the biggest industrial region, endorsed the book. He's now the vice premier for the economy on the 10-person Central Committee. And then the new premier, Premier Li, read the book and announced in his formal biography when he became premier that he was a fan, had read the book, and instructed China to move on the central themes I'm outlining to you this afternoon. I went there on an official visit last September. I met with the vice premier. I met with the government leadership and business community. And 11 weeks after my visit, the Chinese government announced an $82 billion 4-year initial startup commitment to lay out a digitalized energy internet across China so that millions of Chinese people could produce and share their own green electricity on a digitalized energy internet. No coverage of this massive historic event by Western journalism, which is just shocking to me. And they're going to take that digitalized energy internet that they're laying out this year, and they're joining it with their communication internet, Alibaba's, the Tencents, et cetera, and an automated logistics internet to create a China and then Pan-Asia Internet of Things platform. No mention in the West at all. But it's an extraordinary departure. So Germany and Europe and China and Asia. 3D printing. We now have maybe 1 million or 2 million young people who are printing their own products. Small startups, cooperatives, research labs. And the software is free, open source, near zero marginal cost, no intellectual property. For the filament for 3D printing, they're using their own recycled plastic and recycled paper and metal objects and melting them down, again, near zero marginal cost materials. And they're beginning to power their little fabrication factories with their own renewable energy from solar panels at near zero marginal cost. Some of the fabrication labs are beginning to use, in Europe, electric cars to send their 3D printed products either to the market or to the commons, again, running on renewable energy at near zero marginal cost. In 10 years from now, those vehicles will be printed at very low marginal cost regionally. The first commercially produced 3D printed car was debuted, as you may know, 2 weeks ago in Chicago at the World Science Fair. It'll be produced by Local Motors, commercially put out at the end of the year, and it was a Italian car maker, small car maker. And within 10 years, the vehicles that take those 3D printed products either to the capitalist market or the shared economy on the commons will be driverless. We're already testing, as you know, the driverless vehicles on the road systems in California. If you travel out there, you can look in the next lane and there are cars passing you or not passing you, no one driving. So where you see the biggest change here is in the automotive industry. The automobile was the centerpiece of the second industrial revolution. We built the global economy in the 20th century around that vehicle. The young generation, the millennials, simply don't want to own cars. That's grandma and grandpa. They want access to mobility. They don't want ownership of the vehicle. They're a generation that's moving from ownership to access and from market to shared economy on the commons. Millions of young people in the last 6 years have now moved to sharing vehicles, and those vehicles use the three internets. Use the communication internet to connect up to the website for the car sharing. Then you're connected to GPS guidance on the logistics internet. The car that's the closest to you within 3 minutes connects up. You go to your destination, automatically paid in by PayPal. For every car shared, 15 cars are eliminated from production. So Larry Burns did an interesting study. Some of you remember he was the executive vice president of General Motors until 4 years ago, I think it was. He's now at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He just did a study of Ann Arbor and found that we could eliminate 80% of the vehicles right now with car sharing, even at the early stage of the Internet of Things platform, and get the same mobility much cheaper than we have now. So if we extrapolate Larry Burns' study, there's 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks on the road in the world. In dense urban areas, we can probably, the next generation will probably, as it moves to car sharing, which is absolutely the trend, we'll eliminate 80% of those vehicles. The other 200 million vehicles will be shared. They'll be electric and fuel cell vehicles. They'll be running on near zero marginal cost renewable energy. They'll be 3D printed regionally at low marginal cost. They'll be driverless. So we're beginning to see vast disruptions as this Internet of Things platforms emerge. What's happened to communication, entertainment, news, and knowledge, whole industries devastated by the democratization of virtual goods. We're now seeing that in energy and 3D printed products. We're seeing it with the shift from ownership to access with automobiles. And young people are beginning to share everything else, their homes, their apartments, their clothes, their tools, and their toys in a circular economy. The other two things I'd like to cover on this is first, the economic impact. What we have now is the second industrial revolution is stalled. You notice that every time the GDP grows slightly, then it goes down. It grows slightly, it comes down. That's because every time we try to regrow the economy, the oil prices and all the other fossil fuel prices go up, other prices go up, and we get slowed down. So there's just no way to get through that door. But what we're seeing now with the third industrial revolution is an opportunity to build out an infrastructure that would put all our traditional industries back to work at least for 30 or 40 years. ICT, electronics, construction, the housing industry, architecture, transport, logistics, because we have to transform the entire energy grid, the entire electricity grid, the entire transport grid of every country. That's 40 years of employment and lots of business opportunity. In the long run, however, what we're building out here with the Internet of Things is a smart, automated system, smart city, smart planet. Can run it with analytics, algorithms, and small workforces. Some of you recall I wrote a book called The End of Work in 1995 on the automation phenomenon coming. It is coming with a vengeance. So we have about 30, 35, 40 years of one last surge of massive employment to lay out the infrastructure, semi-skilled, skilled, professional, conceptual work. But as we phase that in, the employment is already beginning to migrate from a more automated market economy to the social economy on the commons, the nonprofit sector. Because that's where you need human beings engaged with human beings. It's deep play, not deep work. So essentially in that sector, whether it's healthcare and education and environment, sports, arts, culture, caring for the elderly, all of these are areas that require humans with humans. And it's the fastest growing employment sector now in most countries around the world. It's financed by fees for services. So begin to watch an increasing development in the nonprofit sector. It's already growing faster than the marketplace, all of which portends a very, very different future. The last thing I would mention is the impact of zero marginal cost on climate change. I really wrote the Zero Marginal Cost Society to address climate change, even though that's not in every page of the book. My sense is that I, like many of my colleagues, I underestimated the speed of feedback loops that we could not anticipate. I wrote a book called Entropy on Climate Change in 1980. We had the first protest against the oil companies in 1973 with the Great Boston Oil Party, but we thought back then that this would take place over centuries. We didn't anticipate the feedback loops. And what's terrifying us now is the shift in the water cycle. That's really what this is all about. For every 1 degree the temperature goes up, as you know, the atmosphere is absorbing 7% more precipitation from the ground. So we're getting more concentrated water in the atmosphere and more extreme water events. More extreme winter snows, more dramatic spring flooding, more prolonged summer droughts, more Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes. And our ecosystem simply cannot catch up to a dramatic shift in the water cycle of the Earth. So our bottom line now is we're in the 6th extinction event. Our scientists tell us we've had 5 extinction events in 450 million years. They came quick, massive die-out, 10 million years on the average to recover new biodiversity. We are in real-time 6th extinction event. We could lose 70% of all forms of life on this Earth by the end of the second half of this century. It is devastating, catastrophic potential, and pretty much as my wife says, we're asleep. The only way I know to address climate change is to move to a zero marginal cost society. That means extreme productivity and extreme optimum energy efficiency. Zero marginal cost is the only metric I know that'll work. In fact, my publisher said, never call this book Zero Marginal Cost Society. No one's going to read it. And I said, well, we're going to do that anyway, because every first grader in every school in the world needs to be introduced to zero marginal cost by their teacher in first grade, because it's the ultimate metric for reducing our ecological footprint. Because if we can minimize the use of the Earth's resources by optimizing our aggregate efficiencies, it means we're using very little of the Earth's resources. That's why we can produce goods and services at near zero marginal cost. Then if what we do produce at near zero marginal cost is distributed over and over again on the sharing economy, on the collaborative commons, it never goes to the landfill. We have a circular economy. And if we can move to a digitalized energy internet, it means we're off carbon-based fuels. And if we can move to an automated logistics internet and eliminate 80% of the vehicles and the rest printed out with recycled materials, again, we lower the ecological footprint. So in terms of zero marginal cost society, I think the Internet of Things platform gives us an opportunity for a new architecture. The Internet of Things is designed to be distributed, collaborative, transparent, and open. And if it isn't monopolized by a handful of institutions, that's a big if. If we can maintain network neutrality, we have an opportunity to democratize economic life and let millions and then hundreds of millions and maybe billions of human beings produce and share goods and services with each other at zero marginal cost and create a much more sustainable and hopefully ecologically based society. I think it's a big struggle, and in the book, I'm just dealing with this in broad outline. I go over all of the terribly difficult obstacles in the way of getting us to this society, but I don't think there's a plan B, unless it's staying in the 20th century, which is heading us to a cataclysmic end of this century. So I know that most all of you are involved in the building industry and in renewable energies. Now, let me just say that the buildings will be our micro power plants because the sun, the wind, the geothermal heat, all of these energies are ubiquitous. We have to collect them where we have human infrastructure, and that means we're going to have to transform the building infrastructure of the entire world. We're going to have to retrofit it, get it energy efficient, use it as a storage depot for both energy, data, and logistics, and begin to connect our infrastructures across regions and continents so that we can move this Internet of Things platform along. I'm guardedly hopeful. I'm not wildly optimistic, but guardedly hopeful. And I think maybe we have a chance, maybe, to beat the clock on climate change. But I think that chance really revolves around moving a zero marginal cost society into place.
Wow. That, I mean, that is some huge, not only do you lay out huge challenges, but also huge solutions that require a big philosophical change. Big
Well, you know where
behavioral
I've seen the change? You know the funny thing about this? The biggest change is sometimes in the smallest things. Toys. This is what I've seen. The
Okay.
toys. It's very interesting to watch this happen. Traditionally, a little toddler is introduced into property exchange and market capitalism because the parents buy their little 2.5-year-old toy. They say, we bought this in the store. We're giving this toy to you. It's your possession. It's your property, not your brother's toy or sister's toy. It's your toy. Take responsibility for it. So the child learns right away status. I've got something my brother and sister doesn't have. Possession, power. But now we've got a whole young generation, maybe some that are on this webinar, of young parents who are going up on toy websites here in Europe. And they can pick from thousands of shared toys that are used. They pay a one-set fee, and then they get a credit, and they can get the toy delivered to them. Within 10 years, it'll be delivered by drone or by 3D printed vehicles, very low cost. They give the child the little toy, and they're saying, I want to show you this toy. Another little girl played with this toy. It brought a smile to her face, joy to her life, and she took very good care of it because she knew one day another little child would have a smile because they would use the toy when she was not using it anymore. So what the child's now learning is the toy is not a possession to defend, a piece of property. It's simply an access to an experience, and that child needs to take care of it because that toy will then bring joy to some other child. That's the big sea change that's going on, from ownership to access, from markets to sharing economies. And we're now seeing this in young parents and families now, just beginning here in U.S. and Europe.
I'm going to have you talk to my son, just so he takes care of his toys better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to make sure to mention to our audience that if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A box because we're going into the Q&A session here. I know I've certainly got some questions for you, sir. So I wanted to start off by asking, oh gosh, which one do I want to pick? Well, okay, let's start with this one. Will automation ultimately threaten employment numbers?
It is already, and this is what I outlined in the end of workbook in '95. If you get a chance to look at that book, it's pretty well right on target in terms of what's happened in the last 20 years since it was published. We're automating. All factories are just totally automated now, where we will have all workless factories within 20 years. Only about 175 million people still working in factories. It's just gone. But everyone used to say train up for white-collar work. Well, now white-collar work is automating. Retail is going virtual, financing, banking system, all of that. And then they said train up for knowledge workers, but now with analytics and AI, we are now automating conceptual work, so we don't need all the lawyers and accountants and radiologists. So we're seeing automation is we're going to run the traditional market capitalist economy on automated systems. We do have one last surge of labor because laying down the underground cable for the energy internet and putting sensors into smart roads and putting electric and putting plugs in parking spaces for your vehicles to fuel up. There's so much that has to be done to lay out the infrastructure. It'll keep 2 generations busy, but that's about it. And I think it's a good thing because Lord Keynes, I have a little note in chapter 1 of the book. Lord Keynes in 1930 was the first to introduce technology displacement. He said, you're going to hear a new term. It's in the Depression now. We're in a depression, and machines are replacing workers faster than we can find new jobs for them. And he said, everyone's scared, but this is a good thing in the long run. And then he wrote a letter to his grandchildren. It was scribbled out in 3 pages. And he said, maybe when you read this letter, we will have liberated the human race. Let the widgets, the goods and services that are basic to an economy, let that be produced by machines, and let us get on with tasks that are more worthy of the human mind. Instead of just minding mindlessly machines, we can begin to create, we call it social capital now, but create more of a transcendent journey for ourselves. I'm not a utopian, as some of you probably know at all, but I do think it's a better journey than we're on. I suspect in 50 years from now, the grandchildren will look back and say, gee, my grandfather actually sat behind a wheel in a car and drove it back and forth on a road 10 hours a day for 40 years. Or my grandmother sat there at a desk in front of a computer monitoring equipment going across the factory line 8 hours a day for 30 years. They'll think that's absurd. And
I
they'll
would,
think that's really amazing that people actually spent their life doing that.
yeah, and I would think, I mean, you're still going to have, obviously, maintenance. You're going to have to maintain, even though the number of vehicles will drop off as you're predicting. You'd still have to be able to maintain those, right?
You do, and the funny thing is the jobs that are the least prone to automation are jobs like cleaning services, maids, gardeners, anything like that. It requires so much thinking. These simple jobs, uh, taking care of the elderly, uh, all of these things require such sophistication. We don't have robots that can do this. That's what's so interesting about it. So, if we can have driverless vehicles and all of that, but when it comes to some very, very simple tasks, simply cleaning a house and everything in it, too complicated.
Well, you got
But
the robot
eventually,
vacuums, right?
yeah, but it's just starting. I mean, that's going to come too, but that's going to take longer. We will have automated many of the knowledge working categories we already are much faster than we'll be able to automate cleaning a house.
So let's follow this path of thinking for just a moment. You're still going to have, um, you talked about sharing of residences, um, but you're still going to have someone who owns that residence, and there's going to be a price for owning that residence.
Yeah.
So if employment's dropping off a lot because a lot of things get to be automated and robotic, where does the money come from to be able to purchase real estate or property?
Well, I think, first of all, the capitalist market will not disappear. The companies that survive will actually become aggregators of commons, like the Facebooks, the Twitters. But if you take a look, the electricity companies, the ICT companies, the construction companies, the transport and logistics companies, they all want to begin to aggregate the various Internet of Things. They want to aggregate the energy Internet, the transport and logistics Internet, the communication Internet. But remember, some of it's profit-making enterprises aggregating these commons. Some of it's nonprofit. Wikipedia is nonprofit. That's the
Right.
sixth largest website in the world. Couchsurfing was nonprofit and was bigger at one point than Airbnb. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But in terms of employment, the fastest growing employment sector in the world is the nonprofit sector, and those are paid jobs. You have volunteer, but in the United States, 10% of the paid employment is in this sector. In parts of Europe, it's 15% already. And over half, there's been a myth perpetrated, I guess, by my colleagues, by economists who say, look, this is a parasitic sector. It relies on government contracts and private philanthropy. Not true. Johns Hopkins University does a study of 40 countries every 2 years, and well over half of the revenue, that goes to nonprofits is fees for services. I go to the Mayo Clinic. It's a nonprofit hospital. Our universities are nonprofit. When people say, how can you actually have employment and incentive to innovate if you don't have profit, I remind them that there are 1.5 billion human beings in cooperatives, self-managed, democratic institutions, no profit, the revenue is shared, and around the world there are literally hundreds of millions of people in housing cooperatives, farm cooperatives, food cooperatives, electricity cooperatives, banking cooperatives. They're huge. It's just that we write this out of our history when we teach business school. At the Wharton School, we don't even talk about all this. It's just not, it doesn't exist, but it's a huge economy.
Right.
And in terms of government procurement, the private marketplace gets more contractual work from government, about 35, 36% in the U.S., whereas the nonprofit gets around 32%. So we never say the private industry is a parasite of government.
Gotcha. I don't want to hog all the questions, so I want to make sure I share some from the others. Wanted to go to Matthew. Matthew wanted to know, do you see prices dropping, or will shareholder concerns trump that?
Well, prices have dropped to zero for whole industries. That's why these industries have gone down. Take a look at the YouTube. We have basically young people are spending all their time on YouTube. It's all free. Now, the average millennial watches 20 minutes of broadcast television a week. It's gone. They're on YouTube, interacting with each other. Look at newspapers and look at news blogs and social media. When you're up there producing and sharing on those, it's all for free. Now, you have to have your service provider and pay for your minimum amount of data. And then whether you send a news blog to one person or a billion persons, it is zero marginal cost. The big issue here is whether the telecom companies and cable companies and power companies and even the Facebooks, Twitters, et cetera, are going to try to monopolize the Internet of Things platform in some ways and then close it. But if they do, the technology is such that others will come along to keep it open. Because once you have the technology that favors near zero marginal cost, that's the optimum economy for society, where you can produce and share near zero marginal cost. That's the ultimate economic society. So I think, although I think there's going to be a big struggle with existing companies trying to enclose this, we saw that the recording industry was powerless. Even with legislation, DRM management, encryption, they couldn't stop millions of kids from file sharing music. And the newspapers certainly couldn't stop the blogs. And Encyclopedia Britannica couldn't stop Wikipedia, and on and on. So I'm somewhat guardedly hopeful there. I'm more concerned about whether Facebook, Twitter, and some of the capitalist enterprises that have created these commons might they are trying to use all of that information and data and content for commercial purposes with third parties. But then we're going to have a digital rights movement. The human race creates the content on this commons, our data, our information, our content. So I don't think it's going to be long before the human race, and it'll be very fast, goes up on the web, and 1 billion people sign up for a digital bill of rights and say, this is our content, our data. We determine how it's used on these commons, not Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon. I suspect that's going to happen pretty quickly. I don't think the human race is going to just sit there when everyone's connected and allow a few companies to monopolize their data and their creative content.
Well, I'm guessing in that scenario, I mean, Facebook and Twitter can't go too far because they could lose their entire business.
Well, see, that's it, because they're all based on social reputation and the social capital they created. So if you notice, anytime they get out of line a little bit, there's a scream all over the world, and they have to back up. In other words, a few months ago, they were studying people's emotional behavior or something, and it got out. It went viral. And boy, within 24 hours, they had to back up and say, we will never do that again. So if they do transgress, social capital is tough to get. And if your social reputation gets hit, you could be down and out pretty quick.
Right. Elizabeth wanted to know, she said, Germany has made great strides on renewable energy. How difficult is it for a country to make that type of transition?
Not difficult. Not difficult. In Germany, this has been 7 years. First of all, when they say all the money that's needed, how much money was needed? People put together electricity cooperatives. They got low-interest loans. And now 27% electricity, pay as you save, the loans you paid back by your energy savings, and it was all done without the government. Now, there were feed-in tariffs, which means that if you are an early adopter and you put renewable energy on, you get premium for sending back to the grid. But what's happened is those feed-in tariffs are passed on to the ratepayers. So their monthly bill's slightly higher. It's higher, but it's only a short-term hump because people realize they're going to be facing energy that's really cheap as they move this in on a broad scale. So in Germany, it was done. When they argue that we don't have the money, I can tell you Europe, because that's where I work, when they say, well, we need austerity, we don't have the money, we have the money. There's 780 billion euros, that's $1 trillion, that put into investment in infrastructure every year. It's just we're putting it into new old. We're putting it into the old 20th century communication, energy, and transport infrastructure, which has no S-curve, no productivity left. Can't get anything out of it. It's a waste. So if we just earmark 25% of that $1 trillion to the new infrastructure, we'd be there in 30 years. But it's going to cost. We're always investing in infrastructure. It's just in the old. We need to get to the new.
Madeline has a kind of a follow-up question to that. She asks if you could give us your assessment of where the U.S. is at on this spectrum.
There was a really great cover story in the New York Times, I think it was 2 Sundays ago. The lead reporter was Justin, Justin Gillis, Gillis. And they looked at the revolution we've got in Germany and said, on page 1, New York Times, 2 or 3 Sundays ago, said this is a revolution. No one's seeing this in the U.S., that this has disrupted the entire energy industry, and now it's power to the people. And everyone's producing their own. Big power companies are out of it, and it's moving to California. But California was already there. So it contrasts and shows Germany and California. On my global team, we are actually laying down this infrastructure in countries and regions around the world. We have about 100 of the major logistics, transport, IT companies. But some of our folks put together California. Alan Lloyd, he was the EPA director for Schwarzenegger. So I think it's a good piece on California. My sense is, here's where the U.S. is. California, Oregon, and Washington State look good, more like Europe. Southern Texas looks good from San Antonio to Austin. My global team did the third industrial revolution build-out plan for the city of San Antonio in that region, the seventh largest city. So I'd say Southern Texas from San Antonio to Austin, California, Washington, Oregon State. Other than that, other places are somewhat bleak because unfortunately, the energy companies here are very powerful. They blitz with ads on television about energy independence. They've suckered the country into shale gas, which is a bubble. We got about 4 or 5 years of cheap gas, and that's going to go back up. And tar sands from Canada. So from a business perspective, it makes no sense. It's kind of a short-term fix that only gets 3 or 4 years for the industry, but it locks us into a new generation of natural gas-fired power plants for 30 years. So it's really sad because if the U.S. and Canada stays on this trajectory, they can't move into a third industrial revolution, even if our young people create 3D printers and all of these other technologies. Without a shift to renewables and distributed energy and near zero marginal cost, we're stuck. So I'm kind of hopeful that the West Coast will move east. So we'll see.
Well, it usually does. It usually
Yeah,
does.
it usually does. It usually does. But these energy interests are pretty entrenched in this country.
True.
You know, they can buy the elections. In Europe, you know, they can't buy the elections. They can't finance the elections. They're publicly financed. And it's not just the companies, the energy companies. You have the nation states, the 28 member states of the EU. Then you have the regions. They all have equal power. Then you have the NGOs. They're at the table. Then you have the municipalities. So you have this layer after layer of jurisdictions that are all engaged in a democratic process. And sometimes it's very frustrating, but it really works in the long run. And you don't have a handful of companies dictating the policy.
Let's go back to a topic you were talking about earlier when David asks, do you think we'll see a dramatic increase in litigation due to so many people either infringing upon copyrights or from copyright and patent trolls?
Absolutely. Because basically, you know, patents, copyrights, and trademarks, I have a long section in the Third Industrial Revolution book and a shorter section in Zero Marginal Cost Society. You know, they date back to the beginning of the market era. Actually, patents started in Venice in the 1400s, but really, patent, copyright, and trademark law started with the market economy. They're outmoded to some extent because in a fast-moving world, what good is a 20-year patent? You know, or I mean, why would you? What good is a copyright when you can get all the information for free? Trademarks may be a little different, but we're already seeing a lot of litigation. But the young people have just bypassed it with open source copy left. Everything on YouTube is copy left, meaning you have an agreement you sign saying you can use this and share it with others. However, you can't gain proprietary control over it. Everything on Wikipedia, every contribution is now in the open culture movement, the free culture movement. It's all copy left, meaning you sign an agreement that you can use it, share it with others, but you can't then possess it. So this is happening now with all sorts of stuff on the internet. Most of the stuff you get on the internet, on some of the file sharing on music, but especially YouTube and the blogs and Wikipedia and all that, it's all free. And now 3D printing, the software, free.
I wanted to get back to a couple of questions that I had for you. And again, I would encourage our audience to submit more questions as we go along here. What's your opinion on tidal power? You talked about geothermal, you talked about wind, you talked about solar earlier. What about
It's
tidal?
promising. It's promising. I mean, we're seeing the exponential curves first in solar and wind, for sure, for 20 years. I think the next up will be geothermal in terms of moving on more of an exponential curve in terms of increasing capacity, reducing cost. I think that bioconversion is going to be a contender, and tidal for sure, wave and tidal for sure, but they're not where solar and wind is yet, but they will be. We'll get there.
And I want to clarify something too. When you're talking about wind, are you referring to the large scale wind and not the small
I'm
little wind
referring
turbines?
to both, but
Oh,
I think the large scale wind has a limit to it in capacity, but vertical wind, small wind, does not. Um, uh, I don't oppose some centralized large solar projects and wind projects, but they're certainly not our plan in Europe because you can't create enough energy that way. If the sun is everywhere and the wind's everywhere, and you have biomass everywhere, et cetera, why would you only collect it in a few central points? Germany doesn't even have a lot of sun, but they're collecting it everywhere. So the thing to remember is renewable energies are by nature ubiquitous. They're found in different concentrations, but they're pretty much some of it everywhere. So why wouldn't you collect it everywhere instead of just in a few places? So early on, the early pickings was to build some big solar projects and wind parks. They're still there. I don't oppose them, but you can't get enough load. You have to have everyone producing. When everyone's generating everywhere, you're taking advantage of the sun that falls everywhere, the wind that flows everywhere, the heat that's from everywhere, and then you connect on a digital energy internet. So when millions of small players produce, store, and share lulls against when they produce, store, and share their surpluses with those who have lulls, you have enough energy to run the world 7, 8, 10 times over without any problem.
well, the reason I asked about the clarification on that was because I'd seen a study that basically said that very small scale wind turbines the ROI just wasn't there. And so
Well, you have to use them selectively. Vertical wind does work. We're using it in Europe, but you have to be selective, but it'll get better. And a lot of it has to do with in creative architecture. We have some of the, I guess, 30 or 40 of the best architectural firms in the world in our group. One is Gordon Gill, Adrian Smith out of Chicago. We're doing a $3.5 billion development zone in Kazakhstan right now for the World Energy Expo, which will be on the third industrial revolution. But he has one building they built, a very tall skyscraper, and the center of the building looks like a double helix. And it looks just like a double helix, kind of open, and then two pillars on either side, and the wind shoots right up there like a wind tunnel and powers a lot of the building. So you got to be imaginative on the architecture.
sure.
Let's take a thing like positive power buildings. One of the Bouygues brothers, Bouygues is a big construction company, and two brothers run it. One of the Bouygues brothers showed me their first positive power building blueprint 4 years ago. No one had built one yet. Acciona had built a zero emission building. They're in our group. But he built it. It came up 2 years ago. It's positive power. But once you know how to do it, everyone knows how to do it. There are contractors now in California building small, affordable, easy return on investment suburban tracks now in California with a little bit of positive power on them. So once you know how to do it, it's simple. Absolutely simple. And now it's going to spread. And I'm sure there are people in the building industry that understand what I'm saying. You can build it per square foot just as cheaply as traditional, and you can get that positive power. It's just understanding the technology, and it ain't rocket science. When you go and look at the Bouygues building, you'll be amazed at how simple it was. In other words, the actual engineering part of it.
Last call to our audience to submit questions. I've got two more for you.
All right.
I agree with you that I don't think we'll see the traditional capitalist economy go away.
No.
But I've always been curious about something. You never used the word barter, but I've often wondered if we would see at the very least a microeconomy move to more of a barter system.
Well,
What's your opinion on that?
I think bartering, we do it, but sharing is somewhat different.
Right.
Because in the sharing economy, what's happening is people are their own producers, and then what they don't use or what they do use, they then share with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go up on a sharing economy, oftentimes you get you buy in with maybe a cash credit or something, then you begin to share, or you just begin to share what you have with others. It's quite different than it is different than bartering. I guess you could say bartering is maybe related to sharing, but sharing is really of a different ilk. It requires everyone being an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, but entrepreneurialism requires that they share what they produce with others, which increases their social reputation and social capital, and it allows them perhaps to either create a nonprofit fee for service-based operation or even maybe a small and medium-sized profit-making enterprises. But it's not the entrepreneurialism of Adam Smith, where everyone pursues their individual self-interest and doesn't give a damn about the common good. Here, to pursue your self-interest, you pursue the common interest, which is what a commons is about. Commons got a bad name when Garrett Hardin wrote an essay called The Tragedy of the Commons in the 1960s. He totally misunderstood commons and said the freeloaders would take advantage and take everything to themselves. What he didn't realize is commons have existed for at least 2,000 years. The democratic institutions, they have management for sanctions and punishments and expulsion, and they work. So cooperatives are the best example of it. Most Americans don't know, but in 1932, we had two countries. 90% of the urban life was electrified, and only 10% of rural life, and we were living in a pre-industrial economy in the rural areas and an industrial in the urban. FDR thought this would be problems for the country, so he set up the Tennessee Valley Authority and said, we'll build 20 dams and we'll provide cheap hydro electricity to you, just like feed-in tariffs today. But they had no idea of how you would get the rural areas wired up with electricity because the big municipal companies didn't want to do it. So he said, we'll allow you to create a cooperative. You just go create a cooperative, you farmers, and we will underwrite low-interest loans. So what happened between 1935 and 1950, farmers actually got trained in how to do this. They wired up the poles on their off time. They got loans from the government for their cooperatives, and in 15 years, they electrified the entire rural America in 15 years and paid back every loan. And rural electric cooperatives are now like 40, 50% of all the transmission lines in the country, and they're the first ones to move into renewables with Europe. So people don't realize there are these other institutions which are called commons. The cooperatives are democratically managed commons. They work. There's a lot of creativity, innovation, motivation, and democratic management. And they certainly can create state-of-the-art change. One more? Last one?
One last question, then we'll wrap up. We talked a lot about the sharing economy. You mentioned Airbnb. We've also had Zipcar on here before. They've garnered lots of press, but what are some other emerging startups that you've run across that you want to share with our audience?
Well, let me use Uber as a good example of what I think is going to happen. You know, in Europe, there's a lot of discussion about, isn't Uber just a rapacious capitalist enterprise that's beggaring the drivers who own the cars in order to bring profits back to Goldman Sachs and Google? What I think Uber hasn't realized is they're trying to take they are creating a commons, but they're trying to use the traditional vertically integrated business model of the 20th century designed for centralized communication, energy, and transport. They don't have enough money in the world for the vertical enterprise to control the car sharing around the world. It's an old business model. And it's not going to be long. It's already starting in Europe where local drivers who own the cars are saying, what do we need Uber for? We create a cooperative. We can set up a website for nearly nothing. The GPS guidance anybody can do. And if we bring all the drivers together in a self-managed cooperative in Milan or Paris or any other city, and we can provide the same mobility and efficiency, everyone's going to go local. Why would they go to Uber? And then we don't have to share profits to a third party, and we can share the revenue and cooperate. This is already starting. So I think they haven't understood at Uber that you can't use that old vertically integrated enterprise. There isn't enough money in the world for their tentacles to reach into every community and control car sharing around the world. It's not going to happen. Again, this is an example where cooperatives allow you at local levels to scale, and then you connect with cooperatives in other regions. So that's beginning to happen in Europe. And I suspect Uber will find that zero marginal cost is relentless. It's going to get them too. They're just not going to be able, they won't be able to stay in the game, I don't think.
Well, I really appreciate your time and the insight. This was very fascinating and also very different from what we usually have on here. And I thought that was actually a great thing to have.
Well, thank you very much for the time, and I appreciate everybody taking time off on their busy schedules to listen in for an hour. And if folks have follow-up, they can certainly get in touch with us. They just Google up Jeremy Rifkin. They can go to our homepage, and I hope people will get a chance to read the Zero Marginal Cost Society, the book.
Thank you very much, sir. I wanted to take one more opportunity to thank our sponsors, Owens Corning and the Green Builder Coalition. And I also want to thank the audience for joining us today. We hope you'll join us on Wednesday, November 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for another edition of the Impact Series, Game Changers in Sustainability. Our guest will be Dr. John C. Warner of the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry. Until next time, take care, everyone.